Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar titled Submitting an Annual Emissions Report Using SLEIS. My name is James Tilley. I'm the Emissions Inventory Supervisor here at DES in the Air Resources Division. I've been at DES since 2008, but began this position in April of last year. And I oversee annual emissions reporting from permitted sources, reporting to EPA, and also some database management. And I'm helping lead the effort to implement SLEIS for 2025 annual emission reports, which is what this webinar is about. So welcome. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar and it will be posted on the SLEIS website, the home site, which we'll get to in a bit, that website. And also, please note any questions you have. We will take those at the end. You can we prefer you to put those in the Q&A field in MS Teams as opposed to the chat. So please do that as we go along. And joining me is my supervisor, Tom Gerton. Tom?
Good morning. Hi, so a lot of you know me. I'm Tom Gerton. I'm the Compliance Programs Manager and one of the 4-member team that is implementing the SLEIS project.
All right, thank you, Tom. All right, let's get started with submitting an annual emissions report using SLEIS. All right, webinar overview. Today we're going to be I'll give a brief summary of what we discussed in the January 15th webinar, which was titled Introduction to SLEIS. That one is recorded on our website. I'm going to talk about what this webinar does not cover. And then I'm going to get into typical requirements for annual emission reports, reporting emissions from emission units. And by the way, most of these topics I'll be doing live in SLEIS. And hopefully, I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to be getting into typical requirements for annual emission reports, reporting emissions from emission units, attaching required supporting documentation in SLEIS, importing data into SLEIS using a CSV file as opposed to manual entry, using SLEIS to report a SLEIS report to help calculate your emission-based fee, validating and submitting your annual emission report to DES, next steps, and then Q&A. One thing I want to say is many of you have submitted Chromair documentation. Hopefully you can follow along in SLEIS. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of them. We still have about 15 that we're trying to activate SLEIS accounts for, and we apologize for that delay. But for those of you who have access, you should have received a few emails, some automated and one from me. And hopefully you can follow along. The link to the SLEIS homepage is in the chat. Tom just put it there. Okay, what is not covered in this webinar? We're not going to go over how to identify or calculate appropriate emission factors for your facility. We will discuss a little bit about some process operations calculations in SLEIS that you can use for VOC materials using density and the percent by weight. We are not going to do facility-specific walkthroughs today, but I am encouraging everybody to reach out to me or Tom if you have any questions. Email is probably best, but you can call us and we can set up MS Teams meetings to help you through this process. We're not going to be discussing the $25 per ton emission-based fee rate. It has not yet been established. And then also some of you have to submit, your permit requires you to submit VOC statements and NOx statements with your annual emissions report. We're not able to do that in the SLEIS, so we're not going to discuss that. That said, if you are a facility that's required to do that, you can attach those in SLEIS, and I'll go into attachments later, and we will accept those that way. All right, summary of the 2025, the January 15th webinar. We discussed annual emissions reporting requirements and how we use that emissions data and how EPA uses that data. We gave a general overview of SLEIS, discussed why it is useful. We discussed how our internal stationary resource database populates SLEIS, and then we went through a basic workflow in SLEIS on how you enter data, validate that data, and submit it to DES. And then also we briefly discussed the Cromer forms that are required to be mailed to DES to activate your SLEIS account. And then we had a brief live demo. I encourage you to watch that video if you get a chance, if you haven't already. All right, so getting started here. For all you permitted sources out there, in your state operating permit, your temporary permit, or your Title V permit, you should have Table 1 in your permit. This is the first table, and it lists all the emission units that you need to report emissions on. Okay, so if it's listed in that table, we need to have emissions reported, even if they're zeros. And this is your starting point for understanding how your annual emissions report should work, and also what you will see in SLEIS. And in this particular example, I've got some spray booth, some cleaning, probably associated with that spray booth, an emergency generator, a boiler that burns natural gas, a number 2 fuel oil, and a wood-fired boiler. All right, also in your permit, if you go down to reporting requirements, and the table number can change depending on your permit. It can be table 6 through 9. In this case, it's table 7. You will see, and it's usually item 2 in that table, you will see your annual emissions report requirements here, okay? And it is referencing those applicable emission units. It is also referencing the regulatory basis for all these requirements. And on the SLEIS homepage, we have a link to these rules, which should match your requirements in your permit. So you should take a hard look at this, because for non-combustion devices, we call them process operations, you're typically required to report total VOCs and each HAP and RTAP reported by CAS number. CAS number is important. It identifies the specific pollutant, because those pollutants, people have different terms for them. But there's only one CAS number usually, so that is important. That needs to be included, and that is part of SLEIS. That is included in SLEIS. All right, for your combustion devices, every combustion device needs to report these pollutants, these 5 pollutants. Total VOCs, if you have to report total VOCs up here, you have to do it again for the combustion devices. Note that the RTAPs and HAPs for these process emissions might be within the VOCs, and we'll talk about not double counting when we go to calculate your emission-based fees. But we are looking for these pollutants. If you are a Title V source, and this is not an example of a Title V permit, you have additional pollutants that you're required to report, PM 2.5, PM 10, HAPs from most of your devices, and maybe some other items for Title V. Also, every permit requires a source to include the methods used in calculating these emissions. Okay, that's under rule and in your permit. And the emission factors and the origin of the emission factors that you used for your calculation. We need to be able to recreate basically your annual emissions report with this information. So we'll show you how to do that in SLEIS, but that is critical. Also critically, there usually is at the bottom of this item, all information recorded in accordance with Table 5, items 2A, 8, 9. Okay, this is just a specific example, but this is your record-keeping table. And this gets into, for this particular example, for the process operations, the total quantity of things like adhesive, paints, solvents used necessary to calculate your emissions. In SLEIS, this is called throughput. And we need this on a monthly basis. Everybody needs to submit that monthly. We often just get annual totals, but we need that on a monthly basis because that is what's required by the rule. Same idea for combustion devices. We always need the type and amount of fuel burned in each device, again, on a monthly basis. That will be, again, be your throughput in SLEIS. And then for certain devices, we may need things like hours of operation. In this case, for the emergency generator, this can be a throughput or it's just additional information. And if you have both, we'll show you how to put both of those into SLEIS. And then also some facilities need to submit additional documentation. In this example, documentation that the fuel meets sulfur limits. One of the other items was Table 5, Item 9, and that gets at that sulfur. You can do testing, or you can have written statements from the fuel supplier. We need that information as well, and you would include that in SLEIS as an attachment. So I just want to point these things out. This is foundational for the annual emissions reports. So please include all the required information. All right, so now I'm going to jump over to SLEIS, and here is your the home page for SLEIS. Tom has put it into the chat. This is before you log in. Here's the address up here. And this homepage has some very useful information for those of you who have not submitted CROMER documentation, which stands for the Cross-Media Electronic Reporting Rule. Here's a link here to the federal website for CROMER, and then ENVC 214, which is DES's rule for those CROMER documents. The forms you can get to by clicking on this link, and then under here we have some supporting documentation like the SLEIS Facility Training Guide. You can download this training guide that we've modified specific to DES, and at the bottom in an appendix there's a quick start guide that describes how you can get started in SLEIS that we created, including how you can download a report to calculate your emission-based fee. Excuse me. There's also the link to the first webinar here. So you can click on that. It'll open up in YouTube. And then there's a link to EPA AP42. This is where a lot of emission factors come from. It's a nice resource. And then also a link to EPA's WebFire emission factors. And one of the options in SLEIS is to select a calculation method that's called EPA WebFire, but you have to have a specific source classification code and pollutant and fuel source for that to work properly. But this is another source of emission factors if you're searching for one. And then we have our rules linked for annual emission fees and the reporting requirements that I discussed earlier. And then there's this SLEIS file import specification. That is if you don't want to use SLEIS's graphical interface and you'd like to use CSV files to import data, we will be discussing that later. So I'm going to log in here and let's see, type in my password. And I'm in. When you are in, you should see, if your account has been created, the facilities that you have access to. I'm only showing one facility here. I only have access to one right now. But if you are a company with multiple facilities or a consultant, you may see multiple facilities. And for each facility, you will see different roles. Everyone should have the editor role. You are only going to have the submitter role if you were listed as the signatory on the Cromer forms. If you are listed as the authorized official on the Cromer forms, you'll be listed as the administrator. What that allows you to do is delete other non-administrators. So let's say you have 3 to 5 people and somebody retires or leaves an organization, you can delete that person. And so that's what these roles mean. You can go into your facility by clicking this button over here. And you should be able to see your 2024 annual emissions report. And you can click on that to go into the report to take a look at it. Again, as we discussed in the last webinar, this is your facility inventory that is based on a master facility inventory that we can control here at DES. And you can click on any of these tabs to look at information about your facility. Release points are where emissions come from. They're like stacks, but they could also be fugitive emissions. Control devices. So if I went in here, you could see all the stacks for this facility. The control device for one of the emission units. All the emission units. And then the unit processes. Now, the unit processes are basically the emission units, but if you have multiple fuel sources for, say, a combustion device, you would see 2 unit processes, one for, say, oil and one for natural gas. And if you go into this, into process emissions, this is really where the emissions report action happens in SLEIS. You can go in here and look at each process, and you could see what DES did. You could see the throughputs that we entered, and I'm going to go into this in more detail in a minute when I start entering an actual report. You can see the throughput, the fuel use here in million BTUs, are the and the emissions that were calculated, the emission factors. If there are notes that DES wrote, for example, let's see, here's a pollutant. You can see comments like, hey, this facility reported the emission factor for this pollutant was from table 1 DES. So DES in your 2024 annual emissions reports, we tried to replicate what we received by PDF or mail or email the best that we could, and to enter all of that into SLEIS. So go into your 2024, again, emissions report, take a look and see what DES did. Now to go to your 2025 emissions report, if you haven't started it yet, you'll see like a little play icon instead of this kind of open icon. And you would click that to start your emissions report. Now I need a second to move to our development version of SLEIS. Oops. Because I've created kind of a mock facility called webinar facility here in our testing environment. Ignore this web address. The web address that Tom put in the chat is the correct one. And here are my facilities, and I am going to enter in to this facility. All right, so here's my 2025 report. I don't have a 2024 report for this one, but you should see that when you get in. You can go and look at who has access to your facility. In this case, it's just me, but if you have multiple people, you can see who has access. All right, so I'm in my 2025 emissions report that I have not yet started. And again, you should review what's at your facility. If something doesn't look right, for whatever reason, please reach out and contact us. Because what we will do is, on our end, we will make a fix. So for example, let's say this wood-fired boiler down here, we have it in here for dry wood. Let's say it also burns wet wood, and you need a process to be able to enter those emissions. You would contact say, hey, James, I need another process. I would add that to the master facility inventory on my side, and then email you and let you know I've done that. And then you would click this button called Resync with Master Facility, or Resync with Master. And you would click OK, and it would resync, and whatever changes we make on our end should happen on your end. And so in these first few years of using SLEIS, we may have to do that a few times. We should have your processes in there based on what's permitted. But if you're like a facility that uses coatings, you might have 10 different coatings that you might want to include as a process that we could add into SLEIS for you. We've done that in some cases, but not if your facility has 50 or 100 coatings, but it is possible to do that. Again, this is your facility inventory, and I'm going to go ahead and get started on boiler number 1, EU04. Boiler number 1, there's 2 of them. That's because this particular boiler burns distillate oil and natural gas. And you can see this is pre-populated with throughputs that are based on what DES entered for your 2024 report. However, you can change this. So to add information here, I'm going to go into distillate oil. I'm going to click that gear icon. And here's some information about this source. If you don't have any emissions, you can uncheck this button for this particular facility. And then you can click save and you'll be done with that. However, what it's going to do is it's going to delete all these pollutants that are pre-populated. And again, these are those 5 pollutants that were in your permit. It's going to delete all of these and your preset emission factors. These are the emission factors that are in your template here that we put in for 2024. It will delete that. So what you can do instead is put zeros here in the monthly throughput totals. Save it, and you'll have zero emissions, but it will keep all that information in case you have emissions to report in 2026. Okay, so this is my throughput unit measure. It's in gallons, but you can change it. The reason you might want to change it is if all your emission factors are going to be based on this unit in gallons. So it's going to be pounds per gallon. Okay. There are many different options in here. And if you want to get to something quickly, like tons, you can type real quickly and it'll go to tons. That go into ton mile, but you can find tons in there. I'm going to click cancel and stick with gallons, because if you change this, it will erase all these emission factors because it's based on gallons, pounds per gallon. Okay. This is your input type or your throughput type. You have three options: existing, input, or output. Existing might be a storage tank where there's just a certain amount of fuel in a storage tank. Input is what we use most of the time: fuel inputs, paint, the amount of paint that you've used. But you can also use output. For example, an HMA plant might use, a hot mix asphalt plant might use output of asphalt as their emission factor, in which case that would be output. You can change that and it won't delete the template emission factors. And then here's your throughput material. You can change that as well. But it should be correct. So I'm going to go ahead. Well, let me and enter throughputs for this device. We're in gallons. And so I'm going to just quickly enter a whole bunch of numbers here. I'm going to put in 0. You can't leave any null. They have to be populated with something. And I'm just going to quickly do that. 0 and 0. Okay, so I've populated that. What's nice here is it'll calculate the total here at the top as you go. So if you want to verify all these add up to your annual totals, great. Some of you may not be keeping monthly records as required. If that is the case, we still want you to report. Please just put all your throughput values in January and then enter zeros for the rest of the month. And down here, you can write a comment and say, oops, I forgot to maintain records of monthly. So I put all my annual total in January. And we've done that in your 2024 reports if you've forgotten to report those monthly throughputs. Down here, I have a process is confidential business information. You can check this. That said, we have a rule on how you're supposed to identify CBI. So you can check that, but if you do, you're going to have to provide a comment in here on exactly what is CBI to comply with our rule. We will review that. If we disagree, if we agree, you won't hear from us. If we disagree, the rule requires us to contact you. Keep in mind, actual emissions are not can't be kept confidential, and that rule is ENVC 208. So that's the confidential business information. But if you're going to use that, please write comments. All of these supplemental calculation parameters are optional. In a little bit, I'm going to get into the VOC and density one, which you can use to calculate an emission factor for things like adhesives and paints for VOCs. I'm going to go to this operations page. This is all optional information. We had to keep it there because we couldn't remove it. If you want to include information there, you can. And then here is your emissions page. Okay, so I have entered all my throughputs here, and I can click calculate all. And it calculates all my emissions in tons. And again, these are your pollutants. You can click on each one, a drop down for each one. And you can see the emission factor pre-populated, but you can change that. Although it's pre-populated, the facility is still required to verify it. It's still your responsibility to make sure it's correct. But DES has entered the ones for 2024. And you need to keep in mind that these things can change. AP42 can be updated. If you have an engine that's a tiered engine using emission factors from federal rule, that's based on grams per kilowatt hour. And so it's going to be based on the hours of operation. So that would change every year depending on how often you operated it. And so these things change. So you have your pollutants here. These are the 5 that are required to be reported for combustion devices. But there are 1,200 pollutants and in SLEIS. And if you start typing in the CAS number or the name of the pollutant, it'll pop up. And I'll just give an example here. Here's aluminum that pops up. If you change anything though, I'm going to lose that emission factor. Whoops. PM filterable. There's my PM filterable. Calculation methods. There are 24 different calculation methods. This is mostly just identifying how you calculated your emissions. And some of them are no emission factor. You could see a SEMS here. Some Title V sources have SEMS. You can use that. Engineering judgment, no emission factor. You would just enter the emissions. Material balance, you would just enter the emissions. Material balance emission factor, we'll get into that more in a second. Stack test emission factor post-control. And you have these post-control and pre-control emission factors. 99% of you will be using post-control emission factors. Pre-control emission factors will take into account your control device if there's one attached. If you use a pre-control emission factor, please reach out to me. It's very rare, but please reach out to me and we'll make sure everything's set up in SLEIS for you correctly. Again, that is very rare. If you select stack test, so some sources like boilers need to stack test every few years, and I have a stack test post control, and I select that. There is a stack test date here. Okay, please enter that date. It's not required, but that is the date the stack test happened. It helps us verify where that emission factor came from. Again, it's getting back to that methods of calculation in your permit requirement. And then down here under each pollutant, you can comment on where you got your emission factor from. So please use the comment sections, use these fields. If all the emission factors came from the same place, you can do it over here on the process page and just write a note here. We'll get all these comments, but these are comments for specific pollutants in case you have one. Your AP42 ones are going to be this US EPA emission factor. Their state and local speciation profile. I'm not going to go through all of these, but it will be pre-populated with what we think you used. So pay close attention to that. Oh, WebFire. EPA WebFire. As I showed you on the home screen, there's that website. If you click this, um, if your SCC code for your unit and a pollutant line up, and there's a emission factor preset in SLEIS, it'll give you an option. There aren't any options in my examples here. But again, you don't need to use that WebFire option. You can just enter the emission factor yourself under EPA's post control here. I can't remember what I had here, but I'm going to hit cancel and go back in here. And apologies, I'm going to enter my throughput again. It saved my last information. Go back to emissions, calculate all, and click save. Okay. If you are missing information, you will get error messages. Save often. Even if you get error messages, every once in a while I get kicked out for some reason. If you start a unit, continue with it until you are done. Okay, so now I'm going to go into this same boiler for natural gas and enter million standard cubic feet for each one. To do this quickly, I'm just going to copy and paste the same number. Don't do this. It's just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to go over here. I don't have to select calculate all. I can just click save. And it will my emissions. If for some reason I put in a new emission factor or stack test and I forget to put my emission factor in, I put in my date and I forget to put my emission factor and I click save, you will get an error message and it won't save. It will show you up here and then down here in red. So I'm just going to put in a number there, click save, and I'm done with that one. Okay. My emergency generator. It's in gallons. We got input distillate oil. I'm just going to put 10, 10, 10, and I am trying to use what I used before. Save that one. Again, it's calculated my emissions. Be sure to check these emission factors. If you, by the way, if you use a AP42 emission factor and you want to convert it, that's still an EPA emission factor. You just have to describe in a comment that you converted it from, say, pounds per million BTU to pounds per gallon. All right, now I'm going to do my boiler. I'm going to skip over the spray booth and the solvent cleaning. And this is in pounds. I'm going to do 1,000 through here. See, I did that 12 times. So up here, it should be 12,000. Go to my emissions. Save, good to go. Okay, again, you can go in here, change emission factors. If you're required to report another pollutant, you can enter the CAS number of that pollutant. or the name of that pollutant. For example, formaldehyde, there's the CAS number without hyphens, by the way, and you can enter emissions for that. If I start this and click save, it's going to give me an error message because I didn't finish it. I'm just going to delete that, click save again, and I should be good. All right, spray booths, coatings, things like that. I just want to show you another option in here on what you can do to calculate an emission factor. This is in gallons. This is a coating. I'm going to enter 10 again each month. All right, and since this is a coating, VOCs, if you want to calculate total VOCs from this coating, you can put in a percent VOC. Let's say it's 80, and the density for that material, 8.33. And then you can go to your emissions here. And this was set up as material balance with no emission factor, but I can set it to material balance emission factor post control. And it will say, do you want to use that density, this equation, density times VOC percentage for your emission factor? You can click yes. And this is the same type of window that would pop up for those WebFire emission factors. And it's going to calculate that emission factor for you and your emissions. What we've done with some of your facilities, if you've got like 10 to 15 materials, we've added a process for each one of your materials and calculated that, entered those densities, and it calculates the emission factor automatically. That's total VOCs. Now, if you had within your VOCs a HAP like toluene, you would have to enter the actual emissions or an emission factor specific to that pollutant. This really just works for the VOC content there. So for this one, I'm just going to enter 0.034 tons. I've calculated it somewhere else. Or you can enter an emission factor and it will calculate it for you. So I'll click save there. All right, solvent cleaning. In this case, we've got some emission factors. Same idea. We did have that material balance in this one. However, it doesn't retain it for the next year. So you would have to put it in each year. That said, I'll go into this in a second. You can download a template of your 2024 emission report. It'll download a CSV file and it should have all the information. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and do my 10s again. It remembered my VOC content. We'll do 70 for this one. 7.01. And hit save. And I get an error message because I haven't entered acetone. Acetone, I'm just going to type in my emissions as a material balance, 0.5 tons. Save. Okay. So I have entered emissions for all of these. And you can see the throughputs here. If you go into each one, you can see the emissions. And now I'm going to go back out to the main page here. And I need to attach some additional, let me go back in here. For emergency generator, if you'll remember, I was required to report hours of operation. You can do that in these comments here, like monthly hour operation. You can write January, the hours. So you can do that there, or you can attach it. So like if I click attachments, I'm going to add, and choose my file here. I'm going to add my sulfur documentation here, but you could have other documentation that you upload, like hours of operation, things like that. Okay, so I'm just going to document that. This is my emergency sulfur documentation. I click, oops. Click save. There it is. If I messed up, I can delete it and re-upload. So there's that option, and you can add as many documents as you want. I'm not going to go into this too much, but you don't have to use this user interface. You can go to your 2024 report, or you can go to your 2025 report to download a blank template. But if you click this download template, it will give you a zip file with these CSV files. The reference data values basically just tell you what are acceptable values for the fields in the other forms. Okay, this is a very long list. You don't re-upload that. Okay, what you do need to fill out are process emissions and processes. These are going to be pre-populated with what I already entered. And you can see all the information from these pages. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's complicated. I opened this as an Excel. What you need to know is that Excel, if you look at that SLEIS import specification file, there's fields need to be a certain allowed value. And what Excel will do is take certain values and turn them into dates, non-text files, and then will remove zeros. So in that import specification, it will describe how you open an Excel. You don't open it directly. You have to go into Excel, open it with something called data import, and do it that way. Unless you have another program like Notepad++ to import that data. But you can fill out all this information in Excel and Notepad. And you will need to do at a minimum, the process and process emission pages. Here are your throughputs here. If you want to do a report in the graphical interface and then download it, you can see all the required fields because it'll be populated, but you can enter your throughputs here. And then for your codings, you can include VOC content in density if you have a whole bunch of codings in Excel, and then upload them as a CSV file. So if I had done that with those files, I would click import data, and then I would choose those files and import them. These two are required. The supplemental parameters are not required. And then do that. Now, it will overwrite what you already have in there, so be careful using that. But that is another option. One thing that facilities can do is you can download a template and make that your way of record keeping. And then if you do want to import this stuff quickly, you do have that option. However, you're going to have to be careful when you do it in Excel because it does, Excel, at least my version, will change the format of the fields automatically from when I open it in Excel. So just be aware of that. Read that SLEIS file import specification to get a better understanding of how that works. And if you need help from me, again, contact us and we will work with you on how to do that. All right. So when you're done, like we are, you have a series of reports that you can download in either CSV or PDF format for some of them. A useful report to calculate your emissions is total emissions by source. And I'm just going to click that, open that. This opens a CSV file, and I'm going to expand this. And you can click here and sum your emissions. I have to pay for PM, sulfur dioxide, NOx, VOCs, carbon monoxide. Now this is where you got to be careful. Some of these are already included in VOCs and you just have to know that. So you don't want to double count your VOCs. And I know that toluene and xylene are VOCs that are already accounted for up here. I don't want to double count those, but acetone is not, so I'm going to include that. And then carbon black, I don't think is included in VOCs either. So I'm going to include that. And this gives me my total in tons. Once we give you the dollar per ton fee rate, you can add that here. We'll use the 2024 rate. And then you just multiply that by that. And that is your emission-based fee for 2024. Again, there is, as I'm sure most of you know, there's also a baseline fee. You'll have to add that on there. But that's a nice little report that you can use to calculate your total emissions. But you can use these other reports if you want to know your emissions by emission unit, etc. All right, so I am done entering my emissions and process emissions. I'm going to validate to see if there are any issues. No errors. That's great. Now, if you get errors and you can't figure out how to fix them, let us know. But we've set the bar pretty low in our business rules. So you shouldn't have any errors, but you might, so just reach out if you have trouble addressing those. You might have forgotten to complete one of the process emissions. And then you're going to submit to DES. You're going to click Initiate Submission. You're going to view the electronic document. Okay, it requires you to do that. It'll open this emissions report, and you can review everything. And then you click Continue, and then you gotta check all these boxes. Hit Continue, and then you're going to enter your password again, and one of the security questions, your mother and father's maiden name, and then you'll hit Continue, and it will submit. And we'll get an email, you'll get an email, and if everything's good, you won't really hear back from us. However, we will review these, we upload them, we review them. If we do need additional information or something looks wrong, we will send it back to you and follow up with an email. Okay. And then you'll just need to fix the issue and go through that validation and submittal process again. Okay. I am just checking my notes to see if I've missed anything. Save often. I believe I have covered everything. Oh, if you have multiple monitors, you can open SLEIS multiple times and work on different pages at a time. That's a nice trick that I use when I'm entering emission reports into SLEIS. And I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Whoops, sorry. And sorry, I hit start from the beginning. Next steps. If you have submitted your Chromera forms and your SLEIS account has not been activated yet, we do plan on doing that by the first week of March. That's if you've submitted them by today. I've got 3 more on my desk. If you submit them after today, we're going to do our best to get those in as soon as possible. It does take time to do that, but we will do that as quickly as we can. We are going to email you the dollar per ton fee rate when that is available. All emission reports are due by April 15th. When you submit reports, we do prefer submission through SLEIS, but it's not required. Again, if you don't use SLEIS, the next best way is to email us. We don't need hard copies. The caveat to that is Title V sources at a minimum need to submit a cover letter with a wet ink signature by a responsible official, and then payment of emission-based fees are due by May 15th. And with that, we'll go to questions. And
you want me to read some of these to give your voice a break, James?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so, all right. So Steven asks, hi, Steve, do you need to enter a rolling average into the monthly? No, maintaining a rolling average is a record keeping requirement. That gets checked when the inspector goes visits you every 5 years. But you just need to report that year's emissions. In your case, I got your permit up here. In your case, it's NOx, I believe. Anybody who wants to thumbs up if they got it or have further questions, you let me know. Somebody asked if we were going to go over VOC emissions calculations, and now this individual probably entered late and missed the point where James was saying we were just going over how to use SLEIS. If you need to talk to us on an individual basis, you can give us a call, or you can actually reach out to permitting to discuss those.
Yeah, Tom, like you said, just go back to your permit on what you're required to submit. 12-month rolling totals, you don't need to submit to us. It's probably a record-keeping requirement. But again, go to this annual emissions report section of your permit, and that describes everything that you need to submit.
Right. The record keeping will describe the monthly requirement to maintain records, but you don't need to report every month. There was a misconception in here a couple of times. You just need to report monthly values in an annual report. I described to a couple of people that there's a link for the first webinar on the SLEIS homepage. Okay, there's a question. To gain access to SLEIS, do I just mail in the signatory subscriber agreement? Well, you'll have to go onto the link. Um, I think it's on the homepage, James, to the
Yep.
Cromer requirements. There's a process. You don't just submit the signatory subscriber agreement. You have to submit both forms in their entirety. And it requires signatures from the hierarchy in your facility.
Yeah, I can show that real quick. So if you go to the home page, I just clicked on this link right here. It'll go to these forms, this website, where you can download these two different forms. And there's instructions on how to complete the forms up here. They do need to be signed with a notary present and stamped by a notary. So that's what you need to do to get SLEIS access. That said, we just need that for the authorized official and the person who's going to sign. If you want somebody else to just be able to work on it, not sign or be an administrator within SLEIS, like a consultant to be able to work on it, then a responsible official or authorized official on the Cromer forms just needs to email me and let me know and provide me with that person's email address. And I will give them a SLEIS account so they can get in there and do that. So I describe that in my introduction emails. So if you need somebody else on there, and just let me know via email, and I'll make sure whoever's emailing me is either a responsible official or an authorized official. Sorry, we have those two terms, and I will create a SLEIS account for that person. So email is your best friend. Emailing me if you have questions about adding people or anything else about SLEIS.
Okay, so yes, this webinar will also be uploaded to the SLEIS homepage, just like the first. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question, segueing into this. And if we are currently a signatory for our organization, will our credentials be added to SLEIS? Will we receive a username and temp password, and we're going to have to submit Cromer signature process? So that's the way, exactly what James described. You need to go through the Cromer process. It's an EPA rule, and it basically covers the steps you need to for us to authenticate an electronic or digital signature. When you have that approval, James will assign you as a signatory in SLEIS. So nobody else is going to be a signatory in SLEIS except the people that are designated as such in the Cromer paperwork.
And you can have multiple signatories. We have had facilities submit multiple Cromer documents so they can have multiple people act as signatories and authorized officials. So having redundancy is okay.
And that goes for consultants as well. We just want the request to come from the facility. If they want a consultant to submit their work on their behalf, we just want that request to come from the facility. Again, it'll have to be a Cromer type thing. You'll have to fill out the Cromer paperwork for that individual.
Tom, could I answer this quick question about, there's some questions in the chat as well. Somebody's asking about RTAPs.
Yep, here too. That was the next one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So you can, there are 1,200 pollutants, over 1,200 pollutants in SLEIS. Almost every RTAP is in. The RTAP list gets updated, and we have to reach out to the vendor to add certain pollutants. But like formaldehyde is an RTAP. You can just type in the name or the CAS number. Here's a bunch of pollutants that came up when I just typed in form. Many of these might be RTAPs. MEK might be an RTAP. That's a common one. So RTAPs are in there. You just select the pollutant. You need your emission factor for that RTAP, but this is not an RTAP demonstration. This is just emissions of RTAPs. Your RTAP demonstration is a different requirement that you need to kind of hold on to as a record keeping requirement or reporting requirement if DES requests it. So I hope that.
Yeah, that would be a compliance demonstration that you'll have to keep on file. And then we talked about how certain things are RTAPs and HAPs and VOCs. Most everything is a VOC, and you'll pay emissions on VOCs. There are a few RTAPs though that aren't VOCs, like acetone is by far the biggest one, and say tertiobutyl acetate, and there's a few. You need to know what those are, because those you'll have to pay emissions on those as well, because they're not already included in VOCs. Okay. So how do we incorporate a new stack test emission factor? I got a thumbs up from Ryan. So James covered that already. And that's there's a date, you enter the date and you change the emission factor. Right, James, you change that. I imagine you change that yourself as a source.
Yeah. So if I were in, if I had my my boiler stack tested for natural gas, or we'll say, so right now I'm using these emission factors, but let's say I wanted my NOx a little bit lower, so I got tested, or I was required to test, and instead of using the AP42 emission factor there, I wanted to use a stack test emission factor post-control. There's pre-control and post-control. Again, if you're going to use pre-control, contact me. But almost always it's post-control. I would click post-control emission factor, or stack test emission factor post-control. I would enter my emission factor. Let's say I got it down to 55 pounds of NOx per million cubic feet. And then I would enter my stack test date. And then, so 02, 19, 20, 26. And then if you could write a comment, did this stack test on, and the emission factor maybe was in pounds per million BTUs, but you've converted that to that based on the heat value of the gas. You could write a comment in there on how you did that. That's the way to do that. If you wanted to use pounds per million BTUs, you would have to go back here, change that to pounds per BTU, but then you're going to lose all these emission factors, and you can only use one unit. It brings up a good point, though. If you have a unit where you where you're burning natural gas and you want to use different units for different pollutants, we can set up another process for you. We can, if you let us know, let's say you wanted to have two natural gases where you enter emissions. One where your emission, you're entering emission factors based on pounds per million standard cubic feet, and one for pounds per hour of operation. We can add everything, another one of these boiler ones, natural gas, but then you can have a different unit for your emission factors. So we do that. So just reach out and let us know if you want to do that. We do that for the 2024 reports where that happened. So that is possible. Good question.
Okay. Yes, the question is, can I be both the authorized official and the certifying officer? The answer is yes. You can be all three. You can fulfill all three roles. We just ask that you give it due diligence, and if there's a hierarchy in your facility, that you include those individuals in the certifying process. Right. You still, if we're not active on SLEIS this year, can we still submit a paper report? Yes, you could do that via email. We don't want to see paper if we can help it. How do you know if your SLEIS account's been activated? You'll get 2 emails from James. One is automated from the system, and James will send another one with links and the information you need to know to go forward. Somebody makes a comment that they won't be able to get a notary done in time to submit in March. But again, you can still submit via PDF report via email. This person asked about states that they thought you could not submit annual emission reports via email, and that is a result of last year and some confusion that happened between the requirements for Title V facility and non-Title V facilities. So we've fixed that this year. Yeah, the RTEP listing included in SLEIS is the current one.
Somebody is asking if they can get a list of all the pollutants in SLEIS, and I don't see that as an option as you come in as a facility user. I know I've downloaded one before. I will get a list. So Pujan Patel is asking that. I think we have to do that on the agency side. I don't see that as an option in here. Yeah, that must be only an option on the DES side. You can actually. So if you click download template, there are these reference data tables. And again, these are like the required fields. And if I search, this goes down for lots of rows. If I click on pollutant code, okay, pollutant code. Starting at row 352 in this particular, you can get all these pollutants. Okay, now ammonia doesn't have a CAS number here. These are the CAS numbers, by the way. But these are all the pollutants in SLEIS. The way you would but there were more. But the way you would know is if it's not there is if you start typing in the CAS number and nothing shows up. So you can type in the CAS number. So like 646060. I went into here, wanted to add a pollutant over here. Started typing that 646060. There's that pollutant. But you can type in the CAS number to confirm whether or not it's there. CAS numbers are very important. Again, people call different pollutants different things. Sometimes they have different common names, so that CAS number is critical.
You can always get those just like Googling the compound. Sometimes there's some details that are required in the form that the substance is used in your facility, but generally a straightforward. I don't see any other questions. A couple actually just popped in.
I just saw one that says, what year will SLEIS reporting be required? It's not required and we don't have a date. it's a personal goal of mine just because it makes things easier. That said, for it to be a requirement, it needs to be in our rules. And so there's a process for rules that includes public comment. And so uh, uh, we would have to go through a rulemaking process to do that. And so we haven't started that. But hopefully, I imagine we would email all the facilities notifying them of this rulemaking, and you could comment on whether or not you think it should be required, um, as well as when. So.
Okay, all right. So there's a question about whether permit renewals will be moved to an online system, and fortunately, that is not under our purview. These projects have to be funded. This one was funded by a grant from EPA. So any other kind of process like this, any changes to that would have to be a project from the top, and we don't cover the permitting areas. See, will New Hampshire DES EPA roll participant emission factors into this system? I'm not sure if I understand that question. If you mean particulate, they're already in the system. If you want to, follow up with another statement after that, go ahead, please. But I don't know what a participant emission factor is.
Yeah, if you're referring to like engineering calculations, so SLEIS can only do a few calculations, basically emission factor times throughput emissions. There was that VOC density calculation that it can do. If you have RTAP emissions and you have multiple calculations where you can't come up with an emission factor, usually you can come up with an emission factor at least for that year. You do have a calculation option here where it's engineering judgment, which is engineering calculations, where you would enter the pollutant, and then you would just have to enter the emissions and describe or upload in an attachment how you made those calculations. That said, usually those calculations produce an emission factor. So you could go down here and say site-specific emission factor that you've developed, or maybe it came from the vendor, and identify it that way, and then enter that emission factor in.
Those types of emission factors, though, need to be approved when you're doing your permit. The permit engineers need to agree that it's representative of your emissions.
And Sandra Wyman's asking about the 4 different thresholds to show compliance. Again, that is a RTAP compliance demonstration, which is a different requirement. Many of you might have that kind of embedded into your annual emissions report, but that is different. So that type of information, you can attach it, but that's not something SLEIS does. That's showing that you've met the annual, the short-term and long-term ambient air limits for a particular RTAP. So you're demonstrating compliance with that limit. But that is separate, and there are 4 different ways to do that. But that's separate from the annual emissions report. You're just reporting actual emissions.
Okay, last comment here from Sandra. Need to model all new paints over 5-year life of permit. Is that a question? I'm not sure I understand. Okay. Yeah, if you have a lot of RTAPs at your facility, it is a challenge. That's where those a CSV template would really come in handy.
I got a separate question in the chat, a personal chat actually, that asked about RTAPs. When the RTAP list is updated, do we update SLEIS? We are going to try to do that, but it does take time and it also takes money because we have to ask our vendor to add those. And so we will try to do that, but there's going to be a significant delay. If for some reason you're not able to report a specific RTAP, and it's very rare, because like I said, I think we have about 1,200 pollutants in SLEIS. Just write that in a comment. You can manually add it to the report where you download emissions by source if you'd like, but just let us know in some other way that you weren't able to add that. But hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, it is very rare. Most of the changes to the list are to the ambient air limits, the 24-hour or the annual ambient air limits. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. Sometimes compounds come off the lists. Recently, all the PFAS chemicals made their way onto the list. So the changes are not frequent. Okay, I think that's about it, James. I don't see anything else.
Well, we got 6 minutes left. If anybody has an additional question that we may have missed, this is your chance to put it in the Q&A or the chat. Again, if we somehow missed it, again, you can email me with questions. But I'm not seeing anything new.
No.
All right, I'm going to give it another minute to see if anybody has any more questions.
I think we answered this question, and I'm having some weird things happen with the Q&A right now. But yeah, the question is, can I be both the authorized official and the certifying officer? I think we answered that. Yes, you can be all three. You can be the signatory too. I'm getting things popping up on my screen, James, to explain how you put it, how you change an emission factor. Do that again. You
yes, an emission factor. So I'm going to go into my boiler. Oh, I got to share my screen again. So here's my home screen. Going to process emissions. I want to change an emission factor for distillate oil. Here are my emission factors. Here are the pollutants. I open a drop-down menu for that pollutant. Ooh. Here is the emission factor, and I just change it.
The question's been clarified, James.
Oh.
What happens if the emission factor changes halfway through the year? And I think I know the answer, but that you'd probably better off just using no emission factor and reporting the emissions themselves. In other words, you do the calculations on your spreadsheets and just report emissions. But I don't know if you can add to that, James.
No, that's a great question. So what we've done for those facilities that change throughout the year is we created another process for you. So what I would do, let's say the emission factor changes for natural gas, and it can just be one emission factor. I would create another process with the same units, and you would go into the first one and only enter throughput through the month where that emission factor changes. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to figure out where that transition happens in the month and only report fuel through the date of that transition. And then you'll put zeros for the rest of the month. And then in your other process that I would create for you, you would do like the second half of the year or whatever. And we could label those, like we could go in and label those as behind the scenes as the dates for you. But you would basically be reporting two processes with two sets of emission factors, and all the, if it's just one emission factor, you would just have the same emission factors for all the pollutants except for that one. But you would just have throughputs before that emission factor change in one process and then another. But we would have to do that behind the scenes. Please let us know if we need to do that. Or you could do what Tom said, and you could calculate your own emissions, not use an emission factor, and just enter. Like you could take this off. You could say, like a stack test. Oh wait, no, the stack test.
Number like, 2.
Yeah, you could do that as. I thought there was a stack test, no emission factor, but you could do engineering judgment and just put in the emissions and then type in what happened. But we can set up both emission factors for you. Good question.
Okay, it's 11:30. I hope everybody enjoyed it. They learned something. Feel free to contact us if you have more questions, if you need help.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.